Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, participants. Welcome to today's pre-summit event, part of our uh, Unlocking Industrial Growth series, spearheaded by the Industrial Policy Commission of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group in the lead up to the National Economic Summit number 31, or the 31st edition, NES 31. Today, we will be reflecting on Nigeria's vast commodity resource endowment and commodities wealth. And our guiding star would be how we can leverage those latent commodity clusters across the various domains of our commodities wealth, from agriculture to mining, etc., to unlock industrial growth. This webinar is organized largely under the auspices, of course, of the entire Nigerian Economic Summit Group family, but principally spearheaded by the Industrial Policy Commission. That commission has a guiding philosophical lodestar, which is that Nigeria's path to industrialization is most viable along the lines of harnessing the country's vast resource wealth. And therefore, we are anchored on what we call resource-based or a resource-based industrialization framework, and our advocacy to policy on that basis is anchored on a resource-based industrialization strategy for the country. That such strategy should inform the thinking and approach to industrial policy. Today, we have a lineup of esteemed speakers, speakers who would address us, take this topic on from various angles and perspectives. We would also have some distinguished panelists who would be reflecting on some of the issues that revolve around issues and challenges that stand in the way of Nigeria's aspiration to move from just a country that harnesses or extracts, as it should be, I should say, these endowments from the ground, but one that can actually harness them into value chains that are robust, that are sustainable, that are productive, and which ultimately translates to industrial growth and transformation. And so what we have today is a packed session. I am McDonald Uka. I am the head of economic intelligence. I head the economic intelligence function at Flour Mills of Nigeria, the FMN Group. And I also double as the thematic lead for the agricultural thematic group of the Industrial Policy Commission. And I would be moderating the session, but also very specifically the panel conversations to ensue later as we move along. For the time being, we have a lineup of activities in the lead up to that. We'll have our esteemed facilitator of the Industrial Policy Commission, Dr. Muda Yusuf, welcome us all and set the context for deliberations. We'll have distinguished Professor Osita Agbu, who is a professor of international relations, extremely distinguished, and presently the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic at Bayes University in Abuja. And he'll be speaking to us from his wealth of expertise on how Nigeria can leverage the oil and gas sector to catalyze steel development and build economic linkages within Nigeria's steel industry. Immediately after that, we would have engineer and Dr. Umar Hassan, who is currently the president of the Nigerian Society of Mining Engineers. And he would speak to us on lessons from Nigeria's limestone and cement value chain development, and what the insights from those lessons are for our ability to develop commodity value chains in general, including in especially in other value chains where we've not been quite as successful as we have been in the cement value chain in developing them. Afterwards, I'll step in with my panelists. Those panelists will include Dr. Laura Ami, who is the co-thematic lead of the mining thematic group under the NESG's, under the Industrial Policy Commission, which is spearheading this today. We also have Mrs. Fatima Abdul Fatai, who is the vice chairman of the Kursi Group, which is an indigenous commodities, especially mining industry player, she would give us the perspective of a practitioner that's in the trenches and confronting headlong the challenges of transforming Nigeria's commodities value chain. We would have Ms. Kashimana Tsumba, who is the thematic lead of the Marine and Blue Economy thematic group under the Industrial Policy Commission as well. And then sequel to his address and his presentation to us, Dr. Hassan would also step in as a panelist in his capacity as the president of the Nigerian Society of Mining Engineers. And afterwards, we would have, I would, of course, attempt to synthesize as best I can the various perspectives shared and some of the key insights that we believe are relevant to take away from the session in the lead up to the summit, and also to inform advocacy approaches going forward. And afterwards, finally, Ms. Rahila Thomas, who is country director, energy market and regulatory consultants, and also co-facilitator of the Industrial Policy Commission, would grace us with closing remarks. So with that context, with that enumeration of our agenda having been set, I will invite our esteemed Dr. Muda Yusuf to welcome us all and set the context for our deliberations. Dr. Muda, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, McDonald. Thank you very much for that excellent introduction. It's my pleasure to welcome all our distinguished participants, our panelists, discussants, members of the NESG, our board members, heads of ministries, departments, agencies, captains of industry, heads of associations. On behalf of the board and management of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, I'm honored to warmly welcome our distinguished panelists and esteemed participants to this pre-summit event themed Unlocking Industrial Growth Series, Leveraging Latent Commodity Clusters, hosted by the Industrial Policy Commission of the NESG. The event is part of the pre-summit engagements of the 31st Nigeria Economic Summit, that's NEST 31, jointly organized by the Nigeria Economic Summit Group and the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. These engagements are aimed at building momentum through inclusive dialogues in the weeks leading to the NEST 31, scheduled for October 6th to 8th, 2025. If you have not registered, I encourage you to do so via our website, https://31nesg.org. Today, we are convened to interrogate a question that strikes at the heart of Nigeria's industrialization agenda. Can Nigeria harness its vast commodity base to create integrated clusters that drive sustained industrial growth and economic transformation? Despite being richly endowed with hydrocarbons, solid minerals, and agricultural commodities, Nigeria's industrial ecosystem has largely struggled to move beyond a fragmented, resource-dependent model. Our manufacturing value added per capita remains at just $216, far behind that of South Africa, which is $645, and Egypt, which is $524. This signals an urgent need to rethink our approach to leveraging resources for industrial competitiveness. Global practice shows that commodity clusters are not just about proximity of resources, but about building industrial ecosystems. These ecosystems thrive on a robust R&D, technology transfer, supportive infrastructure, and governance frameworks that incentivize private sector innovation. To this end, transforming Nigerian latent commodity clusters into world-class industrial hubs will require deliberate efforts, especially in building integrated value chains, strengthening industrial clusters, fostering innovation, R&D, and technology-driven solutions, and enhancing governance mechanisms. This session is the second in a three-part series is designed to deepen our understanding of how Nigeria can maximize its commodity endowments through cluster-based strategies, while strengthening linkages with engineering, infrastructure, manufacturing, and technology-driven sectors. Industrialization is at the core of not merely economic statistics. It's about job creation and national competitiveness. By harnessing the latent commodity clusters, we can expand beyond primary exports and position Nigeria as a leading hub for industrial value creation in Africa. I thank you all sincerely for honoring this invitation. Your insights, partnerships, and comments are indispensable in shaping this conversation and actionable policy and impactful outcomes. I thank you all most sincerely for your attention. Thank you very much. Over to you, McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf, Dr. Muda. Thank you very much. That was our esteemed Dr. Muda Yusuf, the facilitator of the Industrial Policy Commission, setting the very appropriate context for our deliberations. Next up, I'll invite Dr. Osita Agbu, who is a professor of international relations and the vice chancellor academic of Bayes University, Abuja, to speak to us and share his wealth of insights on leveraging the oil and gas sector to catalyze steel development and economic linkages within Nigeria's steel industry. Professor Agbu, like I have already mentioned, is a professor of international relations at the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy, Bayes University, Abuja. He currently serves as the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic at the same institution. He's a specialist in governance and democratization, post-conflict peace building, Africa-China relations, technology and development, and Nigeria's foreign policy. He was formerly head, Division of International Politics at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, NIIA, Lagos, where he worked for several years. While at the Institute, he was editor of the Nigerian Journal of International Affairs, NJIA, and the Nigerian Forum for many years. He's currently the editor-in-chief of the Bayes Journal of Management and Social Sciences. Professor Agbu has to his credit, over 100 publications that include several single-authored, edited, and co-edited books, chapter contributions, and journal articles on various areas of political science and international relations. And his relevance to this conversation comes from the necessity of thinking about geopolitics and international relations and the role that it plays in the emergence of, or the role that it now plays in how economies are transitioning in the commodity space, in the natural resources space, with the context of the energy transition as well. So, Professor Agbu, I think the floor is yours now to share your knowledge and insights with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oka, for the introduction, and I thank the previous speakers. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity given me to share my thoughts on this very important issue of commodity value chain development and the linkages between the oil and gas industry and the iron and steel industry. I've always had this interest in technology development, as they usually say that technology is power. And therefore, it was not surprising that our country tried to get into the development of the iron and steel industry several decades ago. And we know where we are today. And of course, we know the usual linkages between the iron and steel industry and industrialization. So this is part of the template that I'm going to move on to before I touch on various issues. My slide is there. I hope you can see it. I'm speaking on the topic, leveraging the oil and gas sector to catalyze steel development and build economic linkages within Nigeria's iron and steel industry, and of course, be able to inform policy. Can I see the next slide if it's possible? Okay, this is my content page, please. Okay, so basically, like I said from the beginning, that it appears that we have not really made much progress in the area of developing our steel industry and therefore feeding into industrialization, in spite of the several natural resource endowments we have, as well as the human resources. So this is a big problem for us. Our consumption of steel per capita is still very low. It's about 10 kg per capita, which is very low compared to other countries in Africa and even around the world. Of course, if you go back to history, we must all have, one way or another, been familiar with the industrialization that took place in Europe, beginning from the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, etc., etc. And you find out that the industrialization in Europe was able to occur because of the development of their iron and steel industry, and how this fed into the shipping and fed into the production of defense equipments and ammunition. And hence they were able to go around the world conquering people and colonizing people all over the place, because technology is power. Several countries have realized this, and hence they pay much attention to it, so that they can be able to energize their industrialization and therefore develop. So a lot has been said, and from the NESG concept note of 2025, basically what the facilitator said at the beginning, that in our industrial strategy, historically, we have underutilized the comparative advantages that we're supposed to have in natural resource endowment, of which we have significant amounts of the relevant resources that we need to feed into the iron and steel industry. And what are we talking about? We're talking of iron ore, and we're also talking of coal and other refractory materials that we use in the manufacture of iron and the manufacture of steel. From studies carried out, which has been well documented, we find out that Nigeria still ranks very poorly in industrial competitiveness, etc. As mentioned also just now, that our manufacturing value added is just $216, etc., etc. So we are not really keen in very much into the Sustainable Development Goal 9 on industry index, because you can see our rating there is very, very poor at 94 out of 128 countries, etc., etc. Please, can I see the next slide? Okay, so Nigeria's industrial base, therefore, against this backdrop, relies heavily on imports, mainly imports for its capital goods and other factors. In the iron and steel sector, we import almost 80% of steel into the country. Only about 20% is produced locally. So we still rely so much on exporting raw materials, whereas we have a lot of it. So Nigeria's emerging oil and gas cluster, therefore, the thinking is, holds real potential to drive industrial transformation in the country. Indicators suggest that the cluster has not yet transitioned from a low-tech, yes, we are still very low technology based, is yet to transform from a low-tech extractive enclave into a high-tech, innovation-driven and globally competitive industrial base. So this is basically the thinking. So Nigeria's emerging oil and gas cluster, developing around extractive activities, if supported by the policy frameworks that we have on the ground now, like the Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Content Development Act, the Petroleum Industry Act, that this has the potential of keying in the iron and steel sector supported by oil and gas into our industrialization. Now, I'll take you to an area that I'm very familiar with, our steel development, and why we are still where we are, and what we can do to be able to leverage on oil and gas to support this sector. Started many years ago in 1958. Basically, yes, I'm an expert in international relations, but I'm also a political economist. Many of my analysis in the intersection between technology and development, I looked from the political economy approach, because the political environment influences the economic policies you have, and it may be very instrumental in whether it works or it doesn't work. So from a political economy perspective, we are planning that to truly understand any country at all, not just Nigeria, we have to be able to critically examine the intersections and the linkages between politics and economics. And you can see that play out in our oil and gas sector with the various contradictions you have there between the state and the federal government, between the federal government and the oil companies, between the local communities, et cetera, and where we are. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So I was speaking on the political economy. I just wanted to create that framework through which we can understand why Nigeria is where it is. Next slide, please. Please, can I have the next slide?
It's still stuck on the current slide.
Okay, don't worry. I will try to go on from my own. Okay, so I'm moving on to another slide, but I don't know whether you can see it. Or do I just keep speaking until she gets back?
Well, I think it's moved once, 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure who's controlling it, but they're perhaps even moving too fast for you at this point. I think they're trying to catch up. Maybe go
no,
1
let's
or 2
see.
slides backwards.
Maybe I'm probably on slide 2 or 3. On the, I just started the long road to steel development. Can you go to 2.1? Let me see.
Yeah.
Can I see 2.1?
That's 1 slide backwards. Yeah, that's where we are.
Okay. Okay, so if I were to continue from here, I was speaking on the difficulties we have had with the steel development, effectively from the 1970s, from the second National Development Plan of 1970 to 1975. A lot of effort was put into developing the iron and steel industry. When we visited the Soviet Union, remember that this was a period of Cold War politics between the West and the East. And Nigeria, we know, is a very good friend of the British and the West. But because of the exigencies of the Nigerian Civil War, Nigeria had to bend to Russia, then Soviet Union, to help us with the evolution of our steel industry. And we signed a contract known as the Global Contract in 1979 to establish the Jakarta iron and steel industry. That project itself became an instrument of politics by the West, who tried in various ways to undermine it. And unfortunately, we are still having issues with that project today because we've been unable to get out of the quagmire that was generated from that project. So you can see this slide, and you can see the various agencies that have tried to evolve our steel development, from the Nigerian Steel Development Agency, and then the arrival of Tajprom Export, which is the company from the then Soviet Union. Next slide, please. So over the years, therefore, we have had a prolonged course of deliberations and consultations on how to develop our steel industry. And then finally, even at Jakarta Steel Project, as we know it today, and where it is located, is also a subject of some political discussion, because many people are now, with the benefit of hindsight, saying that it should not have been located there because of the heavy inputs, raw materials that you need to get to that place. And also, even after production, how you're able to move the heavy materials, iron rods, et cetera, off from Jakarta to the seaports where they can be exported. So this is part of the problem that the project has also had. Next slide, please.
Professor, I don't know, how quickly can you speed up? Because we still have another technical.
How many minutes do you have for me for this presentation? You never told me.
Well, I apologize for that, but could we get it all under 10 minutes?
That is tough, but I will try.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Because of that, please, I urge you to take a good look at the slides as I move down. So this is the evolution of the Nigerian iron and steel industry. And then you can see the ones we have on the screen now, how it evolved through an act of the Nigerian Steel Development Authority, Ajokuta, Delta Steel, then Jos Steel Rolling Mill, Katsina, Oshobo, and what you now call Nyomko. Next slide, please. You having problem with that? Okay, let me move on quickly. Sorry, I'm going on to my own. I'll speak from my own end now. Okay, so, but the most important thing to note about the Ajokuta Steel project is that it actually has a power plant. It's an integrated steel plant and has a power plant inbuilt in it of a capacity of 110 megawatts, because energy and power is very, very important for the successful operation of any iron and steel plant. And so, but unfortunately, because of the problems the project has been having, it has not been able to produce effectively to be able to power many of the processes of the plant. And then, of course, we have known all the efforts that the federal government has made to reactivate this project, inviting Tachprom Export of the Soviet Union in 1999, Solgas of the USA, Mittal of India, all to no avail, and we still have serious problems with the project. I'll move quickly to the other issues that have to do with the economic linkages to the project because of want of time. How we can be able to leverage the oil and gas sector to assist the iron and steel industry. As we all know, the oil sector and the steel industry are closely interconnected and have historically enjoyed a symbiotic relationship. Like I said, large amounts of energy are needed in the iron and steel industry, while also we have the issue of extraction and transportation of hydrocarbons from the oil and gas industry, which also requires materials such as steel from the iron and steel industry. So you have this relationship. The oil and gas industry requires, they need to build oil rigs, they need to have gas pipelines, and all of them are dependent on steel. So steel industry depends on energy sector, both as a supplier and also as a customer. And likewise, the energy sector also relies on the steel industry. So this is the situation, and therefore, that's why many people feel that it is possible for us to leverage our achievements in the oil and gas sector and use the resources to be able to buoy up the iron and steel industry. So how do we do that? I've mentioned the issue, the demand for steel products is high. So that's one point of contact. The issue of gas supply. Natural gas is a very crucial energy input for plants. A stable and affordable supply of gas from the oil and gas sector can power steel production. Investments. So oil and gas companies and their related groups, because of their financial power, can become major investors in steel plants and related facilities. Again, you can leverage on the issue of infrastructure development. So infrastructure, as we know, is an economy-wide thing from the growth of the steel industry, as steel is a major raw material for industrialization. Therefore, it also fits into the infrastructure base for the production of iron and steel. Of course, we require government support to facilitate this by creating the enabling environment through incentives, through policies that encourage domestic production and enable stable economic conditions. Of course, behind my mind is the issue of security and how the government should also provide not just the business environment, but also the security environment so that we can be able to engage in all these activities. Of course, there is also the
Thank
issue.
you very much, Professor Abu.
Yes.
I'm going to lend you a little bit of what's going to happen is, although we hadn't intended it at the outset, I'm going to exercise the power to make you a panelist in the panel conversations, because there's actually a lot that's emerging from your presentation that I expect you would have a lot to speak to. And I actually have a bit of the framework to set the conversation for your contributions on the panel conversation. So if you would oblige us to stay on the webinar and participate, even though you weren't originally detailed to do this, if you would oblige us to stay on and participate in the panel conversation, that would allow you to further lay out some of the key insights. But we have to move on to our technical presentation right now, just for the want of time. Thank you very, very much.
It's okay. It's okay. You're welcome.
Thank you.
I pray to be able to stay. I hope it won't take too long waiting for the panel.
I hope so. I hope it won't as well. But I imagine at the very latest by 11:30 we'll release you. But I'm looking forward to really deliberating further with you on the steel industry, because that's very critical to us here at the Industrial Policy Commission on our agenda.
All right.
Engineer Dr. Umar, and thank you very much for your patience. I know we've eaten into your time. But we're really looking forward to hearing from you on the lessons that we have, of lessons emanating from what we've done successfully in backward integrating the cement sector, given our limestone endowments as well, and what lessons or what insights there are for other commodity value chains that we have in the country. Dr. Hassan is the president of Nigerian Society of Mining Engineers. He holds a bachelor's of engineering honors in mineral process engineering and an associateship of the Camborne School of Mines from the University of Exeter. He also holds a postgraduate diploma in management from Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University, Bauchi, and both an MSc and a PhD in metallurgical and materials engineering from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. With over 37 years of experience, he has served as lecturer. At Kaduna Polytechnic, mineral process engineer and general manager at the Nigerian Mining Corporation, and director general / CEO of the National Steel Raw Materials Exploration Agency. He's currently executive director mining at Steron Mining Company Limited, a member of the NESG, and a member of the NESG's Mining Technical Advisory Committee, and a founding partner of Minri Associates, a consultancy in mineral resources engineering. Dr. Hassan, I hope we can prevail on you to get at your insights within 10 minutes. We would appreciate that as much. We'd appreciate that very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, moderator. Can you share my slide, or I use from my own end? So my topic today is, as announced, lessons from Nigerian's limestone cement value chain development, insights for commodity value chain development. The presentation profile is as listed. That the development of Nigeria's limestone cement value chain was actually driven by the need to meet rising demand of cement that was fueled by the then government's infrastructure development and housing strategies policy. So they had the cause to now shift the dependency on importation of cement to local production. And also, we do have abundant limestone reserves or deposits across the country, and also the need to adopt this value chain that will promote industrialization led to this desire. As for lessons learned, what the exercise brought about is that, first and foremost, there were challenges that cement manufacturers were facing, despite the fact that there was so much demand for their product. One, this change in policy led them to have to work on their old equipments, and some of them had cause to establish new plants or import new plants. They also had need to establish reserves because the deposits that they had then were not enough. So there was this need for backward integration, looking for limestone deposits that they could acquire. And the cost of fuel oil was so high and also very, very scarce at then. And they had challenges in importing the cement that was required for the infrastructure development and housing schemes. And also their productivity was really, really low. So the The production level then was about 6.2 million tons, with a total local demand of cement that time as 13.4. That was what led to the importation. So to overcome this, government introduced broad-based waivers and incentives. This included zero import duties for all equipment that were imported for cement manufacture. And they also introduced concessionary pricing and special allocation of fuel oil to cement manufacturers. There was this tax holidays. They simplified the importation program for cement and gave it a timeline of 4 years within which they should all commence local cement production, and that this led to most of the cement producers then modernizing their plants and also building extra lines, and this led to massive production capacities. And they also jointly funded exploration activities for carbohydrate minerals across the country. The outcome of that government policy was that Nigeria became self-sufficient in cement production with excess capacity or excess products exported, thereby earning foreign exchange from that exercise. And that the production capacity of the cement manufacturers jumped from 6.2 million tons per annum in 2029 to 62.8 million tons per annum in mid-2024. This became that the cement industry became a significant driver of gross domestic product growth and job creation. Royalties from limestone extraction also topped the list of royalty earners for Nigeria. And the positive outcome of this limestone development revealed that for a value chain to be developed, there's a need to have a strong driver for that commodity, meaning that you should have an off-taker arrangement that will provide available market, and also government's desire for industrialization, along with the benefits that are associated with industrialization, as listed by the first speaker. And the challenges that will likely hinder the production of this commodity needs to be established so that strategies can be developed that will help overcome those challenges. And also following that, governments needs to now develop policies, favorable policies that would facilitate the achievement of this. And of course, all the stakeholders that are involved in that commodity production need to buy into the policies and the idea of what needs to be done, because it's only by their buying in that there'll be success. For mineral commodity value chain, of course, this exercise refers to comprehensive strategies that will facilitate mining investors focusing their attention from initial extraction of raw materials through to processing, refining, and of course, production of the final products using the commodity involved, thereby capturing more value for this commodity domestically. Stages that are usually involved in value addition are as listed. One, for minerals, is you need to establish where the deposits are, and then, of course, the mining from the earth to produce the raw material. And then following that, of course, the initial stage of value addition, which is called mineral processing or beneficiation, that involves production of a valuable portion and then getting rid of the waste. Following that, for metallic ores, it involves smelting, that is smelting to extract the metals, or using what we call hydrometallurgical method, solvent extraction to extract the metal. And then the crude metal sub-produced can thereafter be refined, and then the products can be used by another secondary stage of industrialization. That's the manufacturing aspect, to manufacture products using the products that is produced. And then the final stage, of course, is the distribution. That's marketing and distribution to the end users. As for key strategies for mineral value chain development, one is the issue of providing incentives to local processing and refining of mineral commodities, because when these incentives are provided, that's the processing and value addition locally will be enhanced. Infrastructure development arising from the challenges that are associated with infrastructure. You know, Nigeria, we do have inadequate infrastructure, such as roads that are bad, Of course, our railway system, we know what it is, electricity, inadequate supply, and then they are very, very essential to support processing operations. Funding of finances is key because of the need for equipment and, of course, the policy reforms, the need for government to develop suitable policies that will promote the local promotion, that's local value addition. And of course, technology and skill transfer is very, very essential. Similarly, there's a need for industrial linkages between various sectors of the industry, those requiring the commodity that's being produced, and then that will increase their productivity. And of course, the need for government to develop transparent regulations and laws to ensure that there's no favoritism in all their actions, specifically in mineral title grinding and also in regulatory operations. And of course, in view of the fact that Nigeria, currently the mining operations is dominated by artisanal and small-scale miners, there's a need to formalize them so that we can break them into the formal system, thereby contributing to the economy. A typical mineral chain or typical mineral value chain that can be constructed or to steel. The importance of steel has been enumerated by Prof. And there's no need for me to go into that. We do have vast deposits of iron ore and steel products or steel plants that are available in Nigeria. We have, as listed, 101 steel and foundry plants, and that our current production capacity is about 2.2, with the target of getting it up to 10 million tons per annum. And the need for massive infrastructure development and housing drive provides ready market for steel products. And of course, as for funding, the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund is available to support such activity along with other funding windows. And the number of steel plants in terms of sections or activities carried out is as listed there on the table.
Okay, Dr. Hassan,
yes.
Could we wrap up very quickly?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as for the typical iron ore value chain, starting from the iron ore that's brought from the mine, and then to produce a pre-concentrate, that's the first stage following the beneficiation exercise that's needed in commencing iron extraction, that will produce a pig iron, which is the next one, and from there, of course, produce steel. Steel there are different products of steel. The steel, you have crude steel, and then you can now have the coated steel for roofing sheets, galvanized iron, and then from which they can now be sent to end users. This is just the second to last slide is different types of processing methods. The strategies usually that are required for that is, of course, give steel plant owners priority for grant of iron ore titles, improve infrastructural facilities, impose high tariffs on imported products, provide single-digit project financing, of course, instill waivers or provide waivers for import duties so that enable producers to import needed equipment because we do not have those locally here, so they need to be imported. And of course, adequately fund and equip iron and steel skills capacity. Most of the steel makers or those that are trained in the art of making steel are aging and have been retired, so there's a need to build capacity.
Is it just me or did we lose Dr. Hassan? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, McDonald. I think we lost him.
I think we lost him.
Okay.
I think his internet has a problem.
All right. Okay.
He's almost concluded. So
yeah, he's almost concluded. Maybe we'll just jump into the panel session. Dr. Hassan, he will be part of that panel, of course. I hope we get him back quickly so that we can he can further share insights with us in the course of that as a follow-up to the questions that we have and the conversations that we intend to stimulate. Yes, our time is fast spent. Thank you, Professor Abu. Thank you, Dr. Hassan, for your presentations, which have been insightful and illuminating. And I imagine for those of us who are not specialists in the areas that you have covered, very, very critical and we have been enriched by the learning experience. So we're going to dive into the panel conversation, which is anchored around the theme operationalizing Nigeria's commodity-led industrialization. And I'm going to have the privilege of asking distinguished panelists the questions that we have come up with in the lead up to these deliberations. So look, could you move your screen? I'd like to put Dr. Annie's profile on display. Dr. Annie, you would be our first respondent on the panel session. I have already introduced, at least very briefly, all of the panelists at the beginning of the webinar, but I'm just going to hurriedly go through your own profile. And he's a senior research fellow at the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies with a PhD in law from Obafemi Awolowo University. She specializes in corporate governance, competition law, energy and natural resources law, and international humanitarian law. Dr. Annie is an active member of the International Bar Association. She has served on the editorial board of the Nigerian Current Law Review and currently co-leads the mining thematic group of the NESG's Industrial Policy Commission. Beyond her academic and policy contributions, she has published widely and presented papers at national and international conferences. She is recognized for her commitment to strengthening governance frameworks and promoting gender inclusivity within Nigeria's extractive industries. Quite the profile there, Dr. Annie. So what I am going to, and thank you very much for your presence and for your time and commitment. What I am going to reflect on really is on resource governance, which is one of your areas of specialization, but not entirely limited to the mining specialization. We're going to sort of like diversify it because of the conversation, which is anchored broadly around our commodities wealth. So looking at that landscape of resource governance across the various domains, there are several challenges that we can observe. We've come to understand some of the challenges in the mining sector that stems from the fact that control and licensing and regulation is domiciled with the federal government, to the exclusion of the subnationals. Yet a lot of the mining activity actually happens at the level of the states and local communities. If you look at agriculture, the Land Use Act underpins a tenure system that essentially disincentivizes agricultural investments. Oil and gas is probably where we have most evolved our resource governance framework with the Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Content Development Act and the Petroleum Industry Act, but even those have their inadequacies. And then there's this cross-cutting challenge of insecurity, right? So it's a big issue. It cuts across the board, whether it's damaging infrastructure and assets that are taking a lot to put up, or demobilizing labor. You know, people can't access farmlands, they can't access mines, etc. So all of these things hurt productivity. So what are your views on, you know, how weak resource governance is affecting the sector, and also where do we think as a country, you know, philosophically, should we be heading? You know, across these domains so that we can harness these resources quickly, but also responsibly and sustainably.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. It's a very loaded question, so I'll try my best to go around them. Now, I think the question gets to the very heart of our national paradox, that is immense resource wealth alongside stunted economic development. The fact is that the equitable governance of mineral resources remains a very present challenge in Nigeria, particularly where we have weak institutional frameworks, which fail to translate to extractive activities into sustainable social development. So there's just that paradox there, what I would term as a resource curse. Now, for the first part of this question, I'll focus on the mining sector. I tie it to resource federalism. And that is, how can we balance sovereignty with subnational agency, that is state governments? For instance, Nigerian Mineral and Mining Act serves as the cornerstone of Nigeria's mineral governance framework, codifying a centralized governance model where absolute ownership and control of all mineral resources are vested in the federal government. So this is in line with the Constitution, which gives the FGN exclusive control of mines, minerals, and oil and gas. You see that in the Constitution. So this actually signifies that state governments lack the legal authority to directly regulate or manage these resources. Similarly, under the Land Use Act, all lands are under the control and management of government of the states. So thus a mining leaseholder will exercise their rights subject to any limitations related to only surface rights. So I believe that this centralized approach, so to speak, exacerbates economic and social disparities. So what I say is that there's a need for a participatory framework where we can reimagine a model of governance or a model of resource federalism that transcends the symbolic to be more substantive. Critically, I must state that benefit sharing alone constitutes insufficient governance response, i.e. 13% derivation, as the Natural Resource Governance Institute had stated that such arrangements frequently fail to address political demands of ethnic representatives or even drivers of violence. So in essence, effective natural resource governance demands complementary participation, i.e. state governments and the communities as well. So what this implies is that beneficiaries can influence development projects and beyond benefit receipts for their well-being. So for example, let's look at the Act. The Act provides that mining title holders must not carry out their operations where you have communal lands or forest reserved, or even places that have ancestral linkages. And even the Act also states that the environmental protocol, which says that you have to rehabilitate your land, amongst others. But what you have really is a kind of disregard for those frameworks as a result of what I would call a lack of participatory governance. For instance, look at what happened in Ebonyi State. I think maybe a year or two ago, I can't remember. There was a mining pit that was left open, right? And it was quite deep. So as a result of erosion, it got deeper and deeper, and then it got filled up with water. And it was left abandoned. So what happened was that some individuals were driving alongside that ditch, and their cars plunged in. So all on board died. These are the kind of issues you have. Even what happened in Ibadan last year, you should recall, I think in a community where there was an explosive, where houses were exploded, people lost their lives. This just shows you that there's a big problem from the central to the state, because the center really can't really govern what's happening at the state, in my perspective. And this is not a question of, we have a lot of what you call informal miners. The reality is that even licensed miners are engaging in these activities, such as illegal activities. So consequently, what have state governments done? They have unilaterally imposed moratoriums or even bans on mining. It happened in Zamfara State because of the conflicts that happened in Zamfara State. And also recently, some states like Nasarawa State and Enugu State have taken unilateral action to regulate mining in their respective states, even though under the Land Use Act, land allocated for mining and oil and gas projects are exclusive to the federal government. The reality is that licensees cannot even operate by relying on that law alone. It's not possible, because you can see what's been happening. Over about 2,000 people have died from community land clashes over land disputes. So that we need to put at the back of our heads. But what I'll look at it from two perspectives. The Narrative Act of States clearly undermines the Constitution, no doubt about that. But there are two divergent perspectives. The first posits that subnational authorities, owing to their proximity to affected populations and ecosystem, possess a comparative advantage in designing what I would call context-specific regulatory frameworks attuned to their local circumstances. So they are better placed to do that. And then I think this aligns to the subsidiarity principle, which is like multi-level governance. However, I would say that centralized policymaking risks fostering what I would call disjointed regulatory frameworks across jurisdictions. It can exacerbate legal dualism and dilute national resource sovereignty. And so this sort of dilution can enable regulatory arbitrage, wherein you see extractive industries exploit weak oversight in certain regions while undermining transboundary ecological protections. So these arguments I have raised transcend mere regulatory design. It interrogates the very structure of federalist systems in balancing sovereignty, sustainability, and equity in resource governance. So we have to understand that centralized control aligns with neoliberal agendas, in my opinion, that prioritize corporate access to resources over communal rights. So this underscores the urgent need for substantive grassroots governance frameworks rooted in indigenous-led frameworks, what I would term as constructivist. So I would say that while subnational grant and resource extraction encompass implementation, control, and monitoring is imperative, granting Nigerian state unfettered autonomy remains pragmatically unattainable. Let's be realistic, given the institutional capacity constraints. However, I would say to empower, and this is a position the NNG has taken, if you want to empower states over community rights, we propose a concurrent powers model of resource federalism, or a mixed system, or a shared system. So I think under this framework, the legislative authority resides federally to establish uniform rules, i.e. environmental, fiscal, and human rights standards, while enabling coordinated oversight and enforcement powers to the states. So they are sharing responsibility, so to speak. So I think this will ensure contextualized execution aligned with local priorities. Looking at agriculture, there are two spectrums to this discussion that need to be addressed. The first is looking at it from an agri-investment perspective, and the second from an agroecological perspective. Now, it is true that agriculture contributes about an average of 24% to the nation's GDP and plays a major role in food security. It's a driver of employment, and it employs about 24 million people. If you compare this to the mining sector that contributes 1% to GDP, or even the oil and gas sector that is essentially very enclave, you will see that the agricultural sector has multiplier effects. Regardless, there are issues. The laws related to the land, that is the Land Use Act, has been a source of significant disincentives for agricultural investments. The state ownership of all land and the cumbersome process of obtaining and perfecting COOs, that is certificate of occupancies, introduces uncertainty and limits the ability of farmers to use land as collateral for finance. Now, existing data, this is data I was able to privilege to read online, is that land disputes alone in Nigeria amount to 65% of civil cases. So there are a lot of peculiar issues around land. A substantial portion of the country's land remains unregistered. That's another problem. The factors responsible are opacity in land documentation and, of course, corruption, and maybe willful neglect and absence of databases. This is regarding the fact that we have the technologies, that we have the drones, we have GIS that can map out this land and create databases. We even have blockchain technology to combat fraud. Therefore, I think there's a continued lack of clear titles and protection of existing titles. We are not protecting titles at all, and even the titles are not even protected. So this limits access to credit because banks require governments issue land documents for collateral, for loans. In essence, farmers rely on self-financing or significantly higher interest rate because this becomes high risk one when you don't have collaterals. So you have a situation where farmers have millions of acres of land, but they can't use it because they don't have proper title to secure loans to be more productive. So I think what happens is that these lands become what we call dead capital. There's a lot of dead capital, right? And according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, dead capital of untitled land is valued at $900 billion US. This is about 3 times Nigeria's GDP. So I think states need to do more to unlock their land economy by streamlining land titling and documentation, because there are multiplier effects, job creation, and even IGR. So I think these issues lead to a lot of domestic and foreign investment appetite, especially where you have those who want to engage in long-term and large-scale crop and livestock production. I mean, we need to do something about that. But on the other hand, there's a flip side to this, because going by history, one of the reasons for the Land Use Act was its availability of land for investment in agriculture. Though not specifically stated in the Act encouraged extensive practices which have led to enrichment of marginal land, including forest and water resources. Now, data statistics by the FAO and the World Bank show that while the share of total land used for agriculture has been declining globally over the last 3 decades, it has increased significantly in Nigeria. Between 1962 and 2002, land areas cultivated in Nigeria amounted to about 68.6 million hectares. That is about 75.4% of total land. Also, Nigeria loses 359,000 hectares annually from total forest estate from a total forest estate of 9.7 hectares, attributable to farming and mining and urban expansion. Farming is the key issue why we have a lot of deforestation now. Taraba State alone lost 22 forest reserves. That amounts to about 22,000 hectares from farming as well and mining. So the truth is that there's a prevailing pressure on the need to feed the growing population. Let's take maize, for example. A study was done on maize recently. Nigeria is the second largest producer of maize, and the country boasts the largest land under maize production, dwarfing South Africa, Kenya, and Ethiopia, right? But Nigeria is made out to fall short of its potential. Nigeria cultivated twice the maize area of Ethiopia, but only produced about 2 tons, while Ethiopia produced about 4 tons and South Africa 5 tons. So the productivity is very low, if you know, and that's a recurring problem. So should we be focusing on productivity or opening more lands for agriculture? So what I would suggest is that we need agroecological policies that promote sustainable climate smart agriculture to protect marginal land, especially our forests, because our forests are carbon as carbon sinks. And we need to revisit there's a policy called Agricultural Transformation Agenda Policy. And that policy is a very good policy. It seeks to improve agricultural value chains from input to processing to market access. And also it talks about improving seeds and fertilizers for production to boost productivity. It talks about enhancing private investment and talks about, there's a last one, it talks about also about access to financial services and job creation. It's a fantastic policy. But for that policy to be effective, it depends on the creation of digital land registries to implement a transparent, accessible, and efficient national system for titling and registration. This can reduce fraud and disputes. And also, it gives farmers bankable titles for them to have mortgageable rights for collaterals. And I think finally, we need to modernize governance. That may be a bit controversial because that means retitling land and, maybe dispossessing communities. So that's something that needs to be managed. Then moving on to oil and gas, I'll be quick with this because of time. The PIA presents a significant step forward in evolving our resource governance framework. It has brought about some much needed clarity in terms of institutional reforms. We now have 3 independent institutions, the NNPC focusing on commercial efficiency. We have the Upstream Regulatory Commission and the Midstream Downstream Regulatory Authority. These are regulatory bodies, and we have the NNPC focusing on policy. So that separation brings about equal clarity of roles, rules, and responsibilities. And of course, there's a strong focus on community development through the Trust Fund, which is established under Chapter 3 of the Act. And there's also local content, which is very imperative for industrialization by virtue of the Local Content Act. And it has some accompanying legislations like the Nigerian Oil and Gas Research and Development Regulations, which provides the research, which provide for research cluster that is linking the academia with government and with industry. And there are also regulations like the growth of indigenous capacity, regulations for oil and gas professionals, and regulations for training of the oil and gas. So they have laws for industrial clusters. But however, as you rightly pointed out, it's not without its inadequacies, right? The oil and gas industry is not meeting its potential. We do not have innovative industrial clusters. These laws are just sitting pretty. We don't have clusters. Professor Osita Agu had just talked about how the sector has a very enclave economy, and it's not having a ripple effect on the rest of the economy. So that is a problem. And then also, I would say that, and that can inhibit what you call resource-based industrialization. Also, there's no access to finance for SMEs, as indigenous players in the oil and gas sector. That's lacking. It works in silos. And of course, challenges remain in the areas of our gas bankability and so on. So the key here is not just having legislations, right? But also ensuring its rigorous and transparent implementation with consistent regulatory oversight and building institutional capacity to enforce this effectively. And I would say that Nigeria's challenge isn't really a lack of resources, but a crisis of governance architecture. Therefore, we need to head not towards isolated fixes, but towards a coherent policy. You understand? So there is need for, I would say we need 3 pillars for resource governance. One is unlocking, which is essentially the fulcrum of this webinar series, which I would say we need to build indigenous capacity and tech absorption. The goal should be to create Nigerian companies that are global competitors and not just local intermediaries. Also, we need to democratize. We should move from the idealist centric bias to domestic constitutive structure that allows states to co-manage as well, you understand, in research management. And then finally, I would say we need to future-proof our resource governance. Here, we should move towards a resource governance model that is not only designed to attract investments, but also to ensure that this investment is responsible, sustainable, and genuinely contributes to inclusive national development. I would say all these require political will and continuous legal institutional reforms. I'll just stop here for now. Thank you.
You very, 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 very much, Dr. Odakani, for that very comprehensive response. I almost didn't expect you to cut across all of the three domains, but you did that excellently. I understand you have to leave us soon. Else, I wanted to sort of like follow up with where perhaps the judicial institutions have weighed in on some of the resource governance contentions between the resource federalism issues and frameworks, because sometimes when the political system is stuck, ideally in certain mature, may we call them democracies, republics, whatever the system of government is, what tends to happen is that the judiciary becomes one of the vehicles through which this, through legal interpretation and judicial interpretation, through which these binds tend to be unlocked. I don't know where we are on that, but I don't know if you can weigh in, but very, very grateful.
Okay, because I'm behind time on the meeting, which I would appreciate if you can send the question to me, so I'll find time to send them back, because I have to rush off now. I apologize. Yes, I'm actually behind time. Please. Thank you. Thank you. Apologies. Yes.
It's not a problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So thank you. Moving on now to I think at this point I want to take Professor Agbu, because I also beckoned on him to stick around with me for a while and let him flesh out his brilliant insights on steel development. So first, what I want to do is sort of like reflect on, and you can of course weigh in on some of the discussions or some of the points that you were looking to highlight as to what Nigeria ought to be doing about steel. But Laura's reflections really were around governance, and in many ways, governance is about choice. In the light of contending ideologies, perspectives, philosophical disposition on how industries or how the political economy, which you accentuated in your presentation, ought to be managed at the aggregate level, but also in strategic industries such as steel, clearly evidently is. And looking at the global landscape, where industrial policy has made a comeback, after the so-called neoliberal era, it's made a comeback now, it's now up and running. We've seen, even in the most advanced countries, sort of like a rethink of how some of these key resources are being managed. We're moving towards industrial resilience, thinking less about market efficiency, etc. The UK has effectively renationalized its steel industry. We had two administrations toggle in the United States with the acquisition of US Steel by Nippon, the Japanese corporation. The Biden administration withheld, the Trump administration approved, but they did that with conditionalities, which entailed the US government taking a share. So bringing all of that home, looking at Ajaokuta, we want to just sort of like focus on Ajaokuta itself as a national asset. Where do you think we should be headed now as a country in terms of how we want to manage that asset and maximize its use? Mindful that, of course, it's not just enough to hold onto a crown jewel. We have to make it work.
Yeah, thank you very much, Uka. And very much enlightening from Dr. Annie.
Yes.
On the legal issues involved and also the issue of our practice of federalism and how this has affected resource governance at the local level. Obviously, we all know that this is a big problem for us. Our country, we claim to be federalist, a federal country, but at the same time, many of our policies and our practices are unitary. And this creates a lot of problems for communities. And so she mentioned the issue of sharing responsibilities and designing policies that will recognize some of the priorities, the things that people want at the local level, so that that can be captured to be able to make progress, or else the projects will run into crisis. On Ajaokuta is really an albatross around our neck. As at the last check, over $8 billion spent. Averagely, it could be more, it could be less, but I was able to verify about $8 billion. And then is an integrated plant, which means that some of the sections of the plant can actually stand on their own independently and function and produce and make money for the country. Unfortunately, it is said to be about 95% completed, remaining just 5% and some infusion of some funding. As at my last count, they said they needed about $640 million to infuse into the plant so that they can complete what they want to do and get some of the sections to start producing, the light section mill, the wire rod mill, etc., to start producing. And this has not been given. Previous experimentations did not work. And speaking to stakeholders on the ground, you know, there are still engineers on the ground at Ajaokuta. People are still being paid.
Yes, we're aware of that, bro.
Yes, and so when I asked them, I've been there a couple of times, even last year I was there. I asked them, okay, so how far with the project? They keep telling me that with a little infusion of funds, the project can be reactivated. They keep saying that, and they are there doing what they call preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance. That means they are making sure that some aspects and sections of the plant are functional, so that eventually when the government decides to infuse the money they want, it can pick up without too much cost. And so the way forward is an integrated plant. If iron cannot be produced immediately, and if steel cannot be produced immediately, sections of the plant can be activated or reactivated to start functioning, because they will feed into our industrialization. The power plant, for instance, is there, needs some money to change some parts. The light section mill is there. The machine tools that you produce intermediate products that you can use for in other industries is there. All this can be reactivated and fed into the economy and be producing and engage people and create employment for our people, pending when we're able to solve the problem of raw materials input. It requires a lot of iron ore and coal. Part of the reason for locating it there in Ajaokuta is because of the proximity to Itakpe, Ajabanoko, etc., so that they can get these resources. But we find out that they don't have the capacity to get. It's an integrated steel plant using the blast furnace system. So it requires a large amount of coal, cooking coal, a large amount of iron, and you need to stockpile this and get it. And once the blast furnace is fired, the technology is that once the blast furnace is fired, it's not expected to stop for at least 10 years. And as it is now, we do not have the capacity for that. And we don't have capacity to import iron ore and enough coal to do that. So the way forward is to get those independent sections of the integrated plant to start functioning and feed into the economy for now, instead of losing completely, because of the government does not want to lose completely at Ajaokuta steel plant because of the massive investment that have been put into. So it's to reactivate sections of it and get it working. I'm sure the engineers amongst us here will probably enlighten us more on this issue, but it should not be left fallow the way it is.
That's actually a very, very brilliant insight. Just to sort of recount these various sections: the power plants, the light section, you said.
Yes.
What's the third?
Yes. Machine tools.
Machine tools. Thank you very much.
Machine tools. Foundry, where they can produce little small iron parts that can feed into other machines in other industries. Yes. They can get orders. They can get orders from other industries to produce, mold certain components for them, and then they pay for that and they supply. So they do it at a very small scale, but this can be increased if they have some investment into the place. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Professor Abu. That's highly insightful. I imagine I've learned something new about at least one good prospect, because many of us as observers of the national conversation, we continue to look at Ajaokuta. Some of us drive past it as we journey north to south,
yes.
and the frustration is immense. I will move on now to a private sector player, a private sector stalwart in the commodities value chain, whom I only just got to learn about in recent weeks. Honestly, I do not mind admitting that. That's Mrs. Fatima Abdul Fatai, who is the vice chairman of the Krosi Group. So look, can we have her profile? I'd like to please highlight it. So, are you there?
Yes, I'll share now.
Okay. That's not Mrs. Okay, there she is. Okay, Mrs. Fatima Abdul Fattah is the vice chairman of Cruci Group, one of Nigeria's foremost mining, mineral processing, and trading conglomerates, with operations spanning over 22 states across the country. Under her leadership, Cruci Group has expanded its influence in the extraction and processing of gold and rare earth minerals, contributing significantly to Nigeria's industrial growth and export capacity. Known for her strategic vision and commitment to excellence, Mrs. Abdul Fattah plays a pivotal role in driving the company's operational success and fostering sustainable development in the mining sector. She is widely respected for her leadership, industry expertise, and dedication to advancing economic opportunities within Nigeria and within and beyond Nigeria. Fatima, good pleasure again to have you. So your company has been around for about 2 decades, and you've made obviously these extensive investments, especially and particularly in the mining sector, even though we're aware that you have subsidiary businesses in other value chains, including agriculture. But your operations are very diversified. I think that's what I found most impressive about them, and they are pretty intensive. You mine, which means you extract, you process the ores. You have operations that process the ores. You're into jewelry manufacturing. You're a jeweler in effect. And if you even go so far as manufacture explosives that are suitable, that are tailor-made essentially for the purpose of construction, those are blast rocks, etc. And then, of course, you also have a financial services outfit that provides capital to your subsidiary operations. This is massively impressive. And I imagine not very well known to a lot of Nigerians. I did say at the top of this that it wasn't known to me until about a few weeks ago. Can you share your experience of your efforts to attempt to develop robust value chains out of these commodities, out of these capabilities? And is there a sizable local market for it? And are these markets well served? Are they underserved? What's been your story? What's been your experience? And you're muted, by the way, just so that you can.
Thank you so much, McDonald. For us at Cruci Group, over our experience in the development of value chain for gold and other solid minerals such as tin, zinc, tantalite, lithium, it has strengthened the importance of moving beyond just the extraction of the materials to actually creating value. The approach we took was to invest heavily on expansion in the site, and also to improve on our processing plant, more like an upgrade, to ensure that we retain more value during production. You understand? And we also focus on partnering with local communities, local entrepreneurs, technical experts to build our capacity and transfer skills to communities that are surrounding the mining site. One of the major achievements or breakthrough, as you mentioned earlier, is the establishment of the jewelry production plant, jewelry production factory that helps local jewelers to access quality products and also create new jobs. The challenge we encountered during all these processes were actually lack of skilled labor. We had to resort to sourcing for technical skills from abroad. employing expatriates in order to keep running the business. Regulatory changes and infrastructure gap also posed a problem for us. And I believe that with government intervention through continuous stakeholders engagement and clear policy advocacy, and also workforce development, we can all overcome these challenges. In a nutshell, our journey at Krusi Group has demonstrated that collaborating with appropriate stakeholders and then adopting a long-term approach to value chain development can lead to commercial success and meaningful social economic impact within the domestic market. And the other question you asked, yes, there is a great growing local market across the various value chain categories for gold and other minerals. For example, there is an increasing demand for domestically refined gold from local jewelers and also from the financial sector of the economy. In addition, industries like that uses other minerals like the construction, battery production, and even agriculture are all expanding. And there are new opportunities coming up that can also lead to more local value addition. However, it is important to note that market size can vary by mineral and downstream industries. While some sectors like the jewelry and construction sector show substantial domestic demands, others such as high-tech manufacturing still offers limited opportunities locally and may require further development. So we at Krusi Group are striving to both meet and grow domestic demand, ultimately ensuring that more value stays in the country. And like I mentioned earlier again, there is a growing demand locally for refined gold. Many segments of this local market for gold and other minerals remain underserved, sorry. For instance, there is a high demand for refined gold and locally made jewelry. There is a shortfall for manufacturing capacity and access of high quality material. So this reveals significant opportunities and to scale further for expanding domestic refining and processing infrastructure. Increasing investment in allied industries, supporting innovation can also reduce import dependency and create new jobs. So there are catalysts that can help to develop and scale robust local markets in gold and mineral sector. The first one is transforming the raw material into finished goods. This will keep more value within our economy. And we can also do this by supportive government policies, such as incentive for local processing, stable regulations and investment. We at Krusi Group are striving to meet meet and grow domestic, ultimate ensuring that more value stay in the country. Infrastructure can attract both local and foreign investment. And finally, public partnership and collaboration with communities can ensure that skill, technology, and capitals are mobilized where they are mostly needed. Combining these catalysts can unlock local market growth and reduce export of raw materials and create jobs across value chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Mr. Fatai, for that. Like I said at the outset, I continue to remain impressed by the scale and significance of the Crucial Group's operations, and so we look forward to the emergence really of an ecosystem around your operations. I believe, and I think this is increasingly well understood, that even first mover players like yourselves would not fear competition, because in emergent or latent industries such as yours, the entry of other players with their wealth of knowledge and expertise can actually catalyze the collective growth of the sector. And your point about what the government needs to do is also well taken. I will move on at this point to another lawyer and another member of the PC, of the Industrial Policy Commission, is Kashimana Sumba, who is the thematic lead of the Marine and Blue Economy thematic group under the Industrial Policy Commission. And the reason we have her on is because our general sense is that we could, the process of harnessing, not just extracting, but also harnessing Nigeria's vast resource wealth works best not if we have not just the infrastructure to develop value chains domestically, but also to plug them into global supply chains. So Ms. Sumba serves as the chairman of the Maritime Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association's section on business law. She's also managing partner at Sumba and Sumba LP Legal Practitioners. She's an accomplished legal practitioner herself in her own right, with nearly 2 decades of experience, specializing in shipping, admiralty, offshore technology, EPC contracts, port concessions, and renewable energy law. She also serves as the secretary of the African Continental Free Trade Area Transport Group and assistant publicity secretary of Women in Maritime of West and Central Africa. She's a thought leader, and she advocates for reforms in Nigeria's maritime and blue economy, evidently and most prominently in her current role on the Industrial Policy Commission. And she continues to shape discourse through professional service and policy engagement. So I will invite her to stay on that course in this conversation and this deliberation, sort of replicate that role. So, Ms. Sumba, so of course, I'm going to pick up on where I left off. If we're going to build national capacity to harness our commodities wealth, we need, yes, the infrastructure to develop value chains within the domestic economy. And co-panelists and other speakers have accentuated that in great detail, right, from Professor Abu and Dr. Hassan, and also Mrs. Abu Fatai. But we also need trade facilitation infrastructure, right, to link these commodities, and preferably in their processed form, because we do not want to stay at the extractive stage, right? But we need to link them to global supply chains. It could even inform a strategic positioning for the country, where we become a processing hub for 1 or 2 of these natural resource value chains in and around coastal infrastructure, and because the maritime technology to enable that, to make that viable, exists. So my question to you is, how ready is Nigeria to build out this sort of maritime infrastructure, ships, domestic terminals, etc., you know, as the necessary integral elements of building a world-class maritime industry? I would note that philosophically, at the Industrial Policy Commission, our resource-based industrialization framework we draw in pursuing it, we draw inspiration from what's happening in Scandinavian countries. And one good example of a country that has done this, which also incidentally is rich in petroleum resources like Nigeria, oil and gas resources, is Norway. So how ready is Nigeria? Will we ever be ready?
We are ready. I mean, when you say will we ever be ready, we're on the right path. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to me. My name is Kashimana Sumba. So I'll start by saying that there's some innovative things that Norway did. We've done some of them, and for some of them, we're just on that path. But of course, we've not taken the exact method, exact route that they have used to do ours, but we're on the journey there. So one of the things that we all know, well, I mean, lots of us know has happened in this new regime is we have the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, which has really helped because there's now something designated specifically for maritime. It's one thing to have a ministry, it's another thing to implement. When we implement, then we know that we're really making progress and putting our money where our mouth is. What did Norway do that was very innovative? What Norway did was that they were very pragmatic about how to source for the funding to build their maritime industry. Bear in mind that these guys have been doing shipping for about 150 years, dating back from the Vikings. So one of the things they did is they looked into the fact that they were into forestry, they had timber, they had fisheries. They used a lot of the financing that they derived from exporting those in building their shipping industry. And initially, some of the timber was what they used to build their own vessels. So you can see that there was like a kind of derived funding. They used one of their raw materials to finance another part of their economy. And lots of times the challenges we keep hearing is, oh, we have good ideas, we want to do vessel financing, but how are we going to fund it? So they use a natural resource within their own country to do that. And that's something that Nigeria can do. Now, we've done a bit of that. You might have heard about the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund, which the federal government has given the go-ahead to disburse. So one of the ways in which we got that fund was getting a 2% surcharge from all those ship owners involved in cabotage trade. So in a way, we've also used something within our own community, in our own nation, to raise funding for the vessel financing. However, that it's one of the steps in the right direction, but there's more that can be done. So one of the things we can borrow from Norway is, look, is there another pathway within Nigeria that we can use to raise the funding, like agriculture, mining, something else, oil and gas, like the different other aspects that we have within our own country. I think you asked, the question was quite long.
Yeah,
Is there
I was particular on, how ready are we in effect, and I believe you've also reflected on this, on the financing models that potentially we can latch onto, and you were particular about the Norwegian example did in terms of transferring what was derived from their own natural resource, yes, and using that to build some sort of fund, a funding pool in effect, to finance the more intensive process of building out vessels, building out capabilities, industrial capabilities, essentially setting up dockyards and all of that. And one hopes that can happen in Nigeria eventually. So just before I let you go, I don't know, you do not need to be optimistic for patriotism's sake, but
no, like there are actually verifiable sources within our economy that we can.
Is the context really friendly or clement to that possibility emerging down the line at some point?
Yes, because we have fisheries that we haven't really explored that far, and if we have our Fisheries Act that is quite old, and we need to change. And if we change those things, then those are like potential areas of exports that we can do that can help, raise revenue for us. There are people fishing in Nigerian waters, but Nigeria is not necessarily getting the revenue from it because lots of them are illegal. We have fish, we have shrimp, we have things in our aquaculture that we can use. We have corals. There are things that we can use. Then also, one of the things that Norway also did that we can do is we can open up our ship registry. So right now we have a closed one where usually only Nigerians can register. What Norway did was they commercialized their ship registry where people who own vessels from other countries could also register. And that then gave them access to cheaper labor and also access to other like expertise from other countries in terms of their shipping services. Another thing they did that helped them was that in shipping, they diversified. So they created a value chain where they trained themselves to meet the needs that will come from shipping. So I'll use a very simplistic example. What Nigeria is doing now is, let's say, I want to go somewhere, and every time I want to go somewhere, I get a Bolt or I get an Uber. So the person that has the Uber is usually the one that sets the price. And the person kind of like has a, not kind of, largely has a monopoly. And when you don't own your own vessels, that's the kind of thing that happens to you. But when we take the Norwegian example, not only did they build their vessels, they invested in vessel repair, they created shipyards. So if the vessel has a problem, if your car has a problem, you are the mechanic. You don't need to call someone from China to do it. Then also legal services, marine insurance, they did that themselves. Now the vessels in Nigeria, lots of our insurance, there's a limit to what it can cover. So even though the Insurance Act has tried to make sure that a lot of the aspects of insurance are domesticated and there's local content in here, there's a lot of things that we haven't built the capacity to cover it. So these are things that we should be looking at doing, and there are many conversations around doing that. But if we plan for, I mean, we have a couple of shipyards, but we need to train and build capacity for that. Lots of times people feel that it cannot be done, but I always ask, why do people migrate in Nigeria? Because they are looking for opportunity. Where do they get those opportunities? They feel like those opportunities are in foreign countries. Now, Norway created clusters with the academia, with engineers, with different aspects of people who innovated. And what that innovation did, the government then gave incentives. And when people know that there's an incentive, if I learn this thing and I know it, there's a role for me, there's a place for me to fill, they will actually stay and it will work. You see a lot of seafarers are trained in Nigeria. NIMASA is already doing that. But you find out that when they finish, they end up in another part of the world. So we need to not just train, but have somewhere where they can be plugged in so that we benefit from what we're doing.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. I think I'm really, really elated and overwhelmed at the novelty and quality of the insights that I've got from you and as well as from our various panelists. I think we'll just dive in directly into Q&A because I see that there are several questions in the chat box. This first is from Daniel Coyote. I'm going to read it out and then perhaps assign it appropriately. My question is, what policies are currently being put in place or can be put in place to encourage domestic participation in the steel production value chain? As we see that the current steel industry is largely dominated by foreigners, which leads to huge capital flights at the end of the day. This we know is part of the issues fueling the pressure on our foreign exchange. And I'll just see if there's any other question that's related to steel. Okay, yeah. This is from Abdul Kadir Kolade Yunusa, and he says, recently, if I'm not mistaken, about 2 to 3 months ago, the Ministry of Steel and Mine Development announced that they have engaged the companies that built the Ajaokuta steel for an overhaul and completion of the project. However, how feasible is that, considering the current realities of how inconsistencies in policy over the years? Well, this is modeled up, but considering the current realities of our policy inconsistencies through the years. Professor Abu, I don't know if I can bother you to sort of like attempt this, maybe taking it jointly. In effect, foreign participation, are you for or against? What are the nuances involved? What are the political economy considerations and how that affects our ability to invest and develop the sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. I got most of the tangent of the question from the gentleman. Yeah, from a political economy perspective, I'm not wholly against engaging foreign partners, but the experience in the past, and this is the political economy dimension, the experience in the past is our own system is part of the problem. So you're engaging somebody, and maybe the system was not transparent enough. The system was not transparent, and so you engage somebody that is actually unsuitable for the job that he's supposed to do. An example was Solgas of the United States. Solgas of the US has also come to Ajaokuta, and they discovered that it is not a steel company. That is more like an electricity company. The other one from India, forgetting their name, Mittal from India was also here. Remember that India's, yeah. Mittal. They also came here. You know the irony? We have a steel plant exactly the same, this Ajaokuta, the same design with one in India, known as Bokaro also. Bokaro Steel. So they came here and started excavating and removing my parts from Ajaokuta and taking it to India. So that had to be stopped again. So our system, our process, our own people, some help foreigners to undermine. If we can get a foreign investor and we went to a transparent process and we pay whatever we're supposed to pay and they can do the job, it can be done. Those areas we want activated or reactivated, we can then focus on them and get them working. It is possible. It is possible to do that. What is the second part of the question he asked? I didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
After
honestly,
foreign.
Part of it was a bit muddled up, but there was something about the Ministry of Steel and Mine Development having just announced engagement with the company that built.
Oh, yes, I'm aware of that, but I don't know whether it's the same company that we are talking with a Chinese company. I don't know, maybe the Luan Steel Holding Limited. They talked about even building a new plant, but I know they are talking with the Chinese company to see how they can, again, like I said, reactivate some sections of the Ajaokuta plant that may even go to the production of military hardware. You understand? Okay. So, and also the light section mill that even the federal government some months ago was saying that it's now ready to invest some money into the light section mill to the tune of 35 billion naira.
Naira, oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. No, not dollars. To the tune of,
I got
I told you before that the engineers on site, when I met them 2 years ago, we were saying that all that was needed by their estimation is about $640 million to complete what they want completed, and they can activate that plant. But now, like I'm saying, another route to go is to take it piecemeal. Those ones that are independent and can go into the market and have products, you must put in some money, you must invest some money there to get them working. And then we can also generate employment for the locals around the area.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so very much. This is very highly insightful, highly enriching. I'm going to just take one more because we're really pressed for time. I don't know if I have any of my energy because I know Laura's left. Or maybe I should skip the PIA question because let me see. Okay. No, this is related once again. Okay, so let me take Chika Okwe's question, and this would be to you, Ms. Sumba. What clear outcomes is Nigeria looking at achieving in the marine and blue economy sector in the short and long term beyond shipping? Kashimana, I don't know, can you weigh in on that? What's, with your sectoral expertise and familiarity, what are the outcomes? What are we looking at in that space? Because again, it's an immense and valuable resource.
Okay, so one of the key things that we're looking at is having indigenous vessels, having Nigerians being able to buy their own vessels. And that's why recently the Capita Vessel Financing Fund has they started the disbursement process. And that's just simply government saying, we will partner with the banks and we will give applicants who can pay 15% of the equity of the vessel that they want to purchase, we will partner with you and give you a 25 million USD loan. And but you must meet the criteria. All banks are allowed to partner with those who are interested in buying. And the reason why we're doing that as a nation is that will reduce capital flight, that will help us participate more in African continental trade. It will also help us be in the driver's seat of international trade. The overheads of doing business will be lower and all that. And when you have your own vessels, you have a stronger voice in international community, like in the International Maritime Association. That means there will be, sorry, the International Maritime Organization. So you'll be able to lobby for the kind of legislation, the kind of international conventions that actually favor us as a nation. So that's one of the things that is at the front burner of the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy. That will also create jobs because, I mean, those vessels are here.
Thank you.
Sorry, McDonald. Can
Yes.
I follow through? I've remembered the second part of the guy's question. It
Yes.
has to do with so if we are going to salvage a Jokuta Steel project, we need inputs of raw materials. And usually these things are heavy, billets or blooms or whatever. And they are usually imported most of the time to save costs through the waterways, through the coast and through the waterways, of which we have an internal waterway. And that is where also what Mr. Sumba is saying comes in. So if we can have indigenous ship owners who are in this loop, in this linkage, and they can be able to provide that service for our steel industries in the different parts of the country in terms of bringing heavy raw materials inputs, iron ore, and all the coal and all those things. If they can do that, then you have an economy going and you have people also engaged and employed. So that is one way that we can link up between the revitalization of the steel industry and also the cabotage trade activities that will go on, that will keep our people also engaged and employed.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. That's immensely appreciated. That piece of insight is immensely appreciated. Unfortunately, I would have to draw the line on the Q&A session. We see that there are several questions that have been posed. Rest assured that these are being collated and we will assign them to our experts and specialists and panelists, both within and beyond the Policy Commission. We'll see that these are adequately addressed. At this point, I will call on Ms. Rahila Thomas, who is one of our co-facilitators on the Industrial Policy Commission, to give closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, McDonald. One of the, okay, I didn't put on my, wait, let me just put on my.
Yeah, I would like to see you, please.
Yeah, my video. Yes, thank you, McDonald. So one of the objectives of the three pre-summits, today's one being the second, is to generate actionable insights and policy recommendations that will inform insightful deliberations at the 31st Nigeria Economic Summit in October. Today's keynote address by Professor Osita Agbo emphasized the importance of iron and steel in a nation's industrial economic infrastructure. The technical presentation by Dr. Hassan discussed the critical need to develop the mineral value chain, and the insightful panel conversations that followed has certainly shown us that Nigeria's path to industrial growth lies not in isolated efforts, but in strategically unlocking and leveraging the latent commodity clusters we have in agriculture, minerals, steel, and energy, which encompasses oil, gas, and renewable. This will be achieved by aligning policy, regulation, infrastructure, finance, and innovation, develop indigenous capacity, diversify shipping, democratize and future-proof resource governance, which all form the cocktail needed to build industrial powerhouses that create jobs, build competitiveness, and ultimately will position Nigeria as a hub in regional and global value chains. On behalf of the board and the management of NESG, I would like to thank everyone that has contributed to the success of this pre-summit. The panelists, Mrs. Fatima Abdel-Latif, Abdul Fatai, Dr. Laura Annie, Ms. Sumba, Professor Agbo, and Dr. Hassan for such an enriching discussion, adeptly guided by McDonald Duka. And thanks to the online participants, over 60 of them, that have taken out time today to join us. Please join us again on the 28th of August for our last pre-summit that will focus on improving Nigeria's industrial competitiveness by strengthening the enablers for industrialization. Thanks again. See you then and have a great day. Thanks, Donald. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahila, and thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our resource persons. Thank you to our immense support staff at the NESG Secretariat, and thank you most especially to our participants and audience. We apologize that we couldn't take all of your questions, but I imagine and I hope that you were immensely enriched by this conversation. We recognize that your participation shows how very exercised you are about the country's advancement through these particular critical channel of industrialization. And so we are very immensely grateful to have you, and we look forward to having you again on the 28th, and also for your continued engagement and participation with the Policy Commission, as well as with the NESG family as a collective. Thank you very, very much for your time today, and see you next time.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.